What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Why more teams in baseball need to spend not like the Dodgers, but like the Dbacks? And do the Dbacks have a realistic chance of acquiring Vlad Guerrero Jr.?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by nothing actually. There's actually no title sponsor for today's show. Now that I'm looking at the calendar, was looking at the wrong date. So we got no title sponsor for you guys today. But still want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now for today's show, we are going to be discussing why more teams are not spending money like the Dbacks, grading Mike Hazen's and the Dbacks offseason, and then should the Dbacks be targeting Vlad Guerrero Jr. and the chances of us actually acquiring his services? We'll break it all down on today's podcast, so let's jump right into it. All right, let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast and let's discuss something that I've been seeing recently in the news. It's just like a lot of praise thrown the D-backs way for how they've handled the offseason, especially when you look at teams like the Dodgers, right? The evil empire spending so much money, and they do, right? They do. Teams like the New York Mets ponying 15 years and basically 15 teams worth of payroll for a Juan Soto. You got teams like the Yankees getting Rodon and Cole and Fried and like every top pitcher that hits the market. And it's like all these big market teams from LA to New York are spending money in free agency, going out there to get the best players in the sport. How can other small market teams in Major League Baseball even compete with the big markets? Well, you could do what the Arizona Diamondbacks are doing, which is taking what you make, your revenue, and putting it back into your team. That is the philosophy of the D-backs. They are not doing anything crazy or revolutionary here. The D-backs do not have the pockets of the Dodgers or the Yankees. The TV deals that those guys have, the revenue those teams make is like double what the D-backs make. But you know what? You know how you could like shorten that gap, the disparity between your market and the top of the tier markets? You doing it by spending at the same rate, not at the same total, but at the same rate. And that really determines like who the best teams are and the teams who are really serious about winning. Because you look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, and it's not a surprise. You talk to all the pundits, all the experts from the Athletic to ESPN to MLB Network, and they are all raving about the D-backs and the offseason they just had, how they're a real contender. It's like, how can this mid to small market do this and keep up all the big market teams? It's because they spend at the same rate. Again, not the total, but the rate. Because you look at the D-backs revenue versus what their payroll is, 2/3 of the D-backs payroll is coming from their revenue. 66 of the revenue goes back into the payroll. Dodgers, 67%. Mets, it's like 102%. But for other teams in the sport, they're not doing that. They're not putting most of their revenue back into the team. And that's the problem that we see in Major League Baseball. The issue in baseball is not the Dodgers going out there and spending all the money, because they can do that. I would say maybe the deferred money for the Dodgers is a problem, right? $700 million this guy, $300 million that guy, and you don't have to pay any of it. I would say that's a little bit of a problem. But my issue with baseball is not the Dodgers going out there and acquiring players. It's not the Mets, it's not the Yankees. I don't have a problem with big market teams shelling out big time money, because that's always going to be the case unless we get like a salary cap or some kind of limit on contracts. Like, the big market teams are always going to get the best of the best out there. But you can still shorten the gap with disparity when it comes to free agency by going out there and spending at the same rate and having a system in place where you know the kind of players you want to target, you know the kind of players who are going to be better in your system that you could extrapolate the best talent from. Because you look at what the D-backs have done the last few years, and it's like the reason why the D-backs are good right now is not just because of they're going out there and they're getting the Otanis and the Juan Sotos, but they actually built a roster. You traded Dalton Varsho when you have this loaded logjam of outfielders, and you got back a starting catcher and a starting outfielder for both of those guys. You turned Perdomo into a real development success story. You drafted Corbin Carroll, who could be the next face of your franchise. Like, you hit on so many different moves if you're Mike Hazen, Jazz for Zach Gallen, finding Merrill Kelly. Like, it was smart scouting and development and having a philosophy in place that put the D-backs in this position. But it's not also hitting on those, diamond in the roughs and hitting on those draft picks. It's also the fact, again, D-backs are taking their revenue and putting it back in their payroll. There are just not enough teams in the sport that are doing that. The D-backs are the 12th biggest media market. Phoenix is, not the D-backs. Phoenix is the 12th biggest media market. But despite that, D-backs have spent the third most money this offseason. And it's like, why are there not other teams, bigger markets, who are spending money at the same rate as Arizona, if not the other big market teams in the sport? Because you look at Chicago, Washington, San Francisco, Tampa, they're all ranked ahead of Phoenix in terms of media markets. Like Chicago, the Cubs, the White Sox, like those teams never seem to spend money. The Nationals haven't spent money in a long time. Boston finally spent money after years of their fans being really disappointed. San Fran, I think, wants to spend money, but no one wants to go there. Then Tampa Bay, they're kind of like the poster child of let's get talent without spending any money on our roster. And so if you're going to have big market teams not spending money, that's going to be a problem. And then teams behind the D-backs, Seattle, Detroit, Minneapolis, in terms of media market, they're right behind Phoenix. And yet those teams don't really like to spend money either. The Twins got Carlos Correa for a big chunk of change. The Tigers got Javier Baez for a big chunk of change, but they do one big deal like every 10 years. The Mariners never seem to care anything about winning. And I think that's the biggest problem that we see in sports, that we see in baseball, not sports. The biggest problem we see in baseball is not the fact that the big market teams like to go out there and sign all the free agents. It's the fact that the mid-market teams, the second-tier big market teams, don't do anything. They sit on their hands, and with the revenue numbers getting bigger, like everyone wants to talk about baseball dying. Baseball just set another revenue record. Baseball is making more money than ever. The new rules has helped bring fans back. Games are quicker. Like baseball is actually trending in a great direction. We're going to get the ABS system soon. Like baseball is in a good place in terms of the product on the field. The actual entertainment product is good. But because you look at free agency and every time you see a Jeff Passanbaum, it seems like it's the Dodgers signing another, Japanese superstar. The problem is it seems like other teams in baseball are not entering the dance. The Dodgers throw their hat in every ring. The D-backs are doing what they can to get like the Corbin Burns and still studs out there, right? But there's not more teams like the D-backs who are willing to take their revenue and put it back on their roster. That is the problem that we see in baseball. Not the Dodgers who are, have unlimited pockets. Like, of course, the Dodgers are going to have more money than other teams. Of course, the Yankees are going to have more money than other teams. But a team like the D-backs to spend at the same rate as those big markets, despite not having as much money, like the D-backs are going to set a club record in payroll this upcoming year, despite still being 13th in payroll in Major League Baseball. And so at the end of the day, it's not about how much you spend. It's like the quality you spend of how much you spend. It's not just the total number. So other teams need to take their revenue and actually put it back in their payroll, because that has worked so much for the D-backs. And that's why Mike Hazen has done an incredible job as the D-backs GM. That's why I want to now grade the offseason he just had with the D-backs, because a little sneak peek, he's going to get a pretty high report card in segment number 2. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offers one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million, no medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. Back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's grade the offseason Mike Hazen, the D-backs GM, just had, because we've been giving him a lot of praise. And a lot of people around Major League Baseball have been giving Hazen, this D-backs front office, praise as well. The last topic was actually inspired by reading an article talking about the MLB Players Association director just being really happy that the D-backs organization are like, look, we see the Dodgers, we see the Mets, but we're still going to go out there and try to compete with them, because he even sees, like the rest of all of us see, there are not enough teams trying to compete with the Dodgers, and thankfully the D-backs are trying to do that because of our front office, our ownership group, our players, whatever you want to say. And it now starts at the top. As always, it all trickles down from your ownership. And right now, Ken Kendrick is in a good groove. He talks about how he's getting old. He wants to see this team win, and he's willing to spend money. And Derek Hall, the D-backs CEO, has even said, if we had the pockets that the Dodgers have had, best believe we would also be spending like LA. So I would like to believe that's true, because, again, in terms of the rate, the D-backs do spend like the Dodgers. They both put 2/3 of their revenue back into the payroll. And because of that, it has led to a really, really strong offseason by Mike Hazen and the D-backs front office, because now let's grade this D-backs front office based on the moves that they made this year, the guys that have left, the guys that have returned, because I think when you think about an offseason and whether your GM did a good job, it all comes down to, what were your expectations going to the offseason, right? You knew who was up for a new contract. You knew who's a pending free agent. Like, what were the holes that you had entering the offseason? Were those holes filled? The guys that were free agents, did they leave? Did you bring any back? And so when looking at the Arizona Diamondbacks, their offseason, Mike Hazen, I mean, he did a fantastic job. And I'm going to give the grade off the bat. Mike Hazen gets an A, potentially an A+. There's still a couple weeks before the offseason ends. I'm going to reserve the plus part of the grade, because it's still an A right now, and it has potential to be A+ if there's a Jordan Montgomery deal that adds a very good reliever, if there's just some kind of deal or free agent signing that, just even if it's just 1% increases the odds of the D-backs winning it all next year. If he does any move that's positive, that moves the needle just even 0.5%, yeah, you're going to get that plus, Mike Hazen, because so far I'm already giving you an A on your offseason, because like I said, it's all about expectations. And entering the offseason, one guy that D-backs fans knew had a great potential to leave was Christian Walker. This was a guy who came in, stepped in the shoes of a Paul Goldschmidt, major pressure on the shoulders of a Christian Walker to replace face of the franchise. We felt like we got rid of probably way too early, and Christian Walker went on to just be phenomenal. First season replacing Goldie, 29 home runs. And if you look at his last 3 years, basically has like 100 home runs right around that the last 3 years, with 3 straight Gold Gloves, over 800 OPS. Like, he's been a consistent stud, fan favorite year after year. And it's like, that guy was replacing the previous fan favorite. And so it's like, how do you replace Christian Walker now in the lineup? His moxie, his power. How do you replace that? Well, Mike Hazen did a pretty good job, because as much as we love Christian Walker, he is a guy that is going to be 34 at the start of next season. So let's go out there. Let's get an all-star first baseman who is only 27 years of age, and Josh Naylor, who is ascending, who's coming off his own 30 home run, 100 RBI season. Like, is Josh Naylor the defensive player that Christian Walker is? Probably not, but offensively, he can do a pretty close facsimile to what Christian Walker has done the last 3 years. So great trade by Hazen to at least replace the offense production of a Christian Walker. We knew Jock Peterson and Randall Grichuk were both probably going to leave this offseason. Jock, unfortunately and sadly, went to the team that beat the Dbacks in the World Series just a couple years ago. But Randy Grichuk, he's back in Arizona. He was maybe the MVP of the Dbacks in the month of September last year, where he went on an absolute tear, trying his best to carry us into the postseason as he went in his last 21 games, 47 at-bats. He had 19 hits. He had 7 home runs in those 47 at-bats, or 4.4 average and a 14.08 OPS. We love Grichuk, and hopefully he gets a little bit more playing time next season. He's going to have a little bit more agency when it comes to that DH role. We love Randy. Excited to see him back in a D-backs uniform next season. So we thought we might lose both of our DHs from last year. We at least brought back one of them. And we know the D-backs wanted to add at least one more back-end reliever this offseason. They were able to do that. Yes, it came within the last week, but Kendall Graveman, still a very good addition to this D-back squad. Would I have wanted someone that was like a little bit better, higher on my tier list for relievers this offseason? Maybe, but Graveman, if you get the version that we saw prior to 24, because last year he missed all of it due to injury. If you get the guy that we saw that had a 3.12 in 2023, a 3.18 in 2022, and a 1.77 in 2021 with a near double-digit strikeout rate those last 3 years as well, if you get 90% of that guy pre-2024, that is a perfect like 6 reliever for you in your bullpen. So that's also a very nice upside addition for this bullpen and for this team in general. And so we talk about what we were expected to, potentially see go in free agency, what the holds were going to be. It was going to be first base. It was going to be add another back end reliever, and it was going to figure out the DH spot, right? And the D-backs brought back Grichuk. You traded for Josh Naylor, and you signed Kendall Graveman. D-backs basically plugged in all their big holes entering the offseason. So that was the expected. But when talking about the unexpected, even if they weren't the ones to like start the negotiations or like initiate it, adding Corbin Burnes, no matter what, gives you an A offseason. We did not expect at all, and the D-backs front office has said multiple times, they did not expect at all to get Corbin Burnes. But the fact that you did an ace that you know is going to be here for the next few seasons, especially with knowing our guy Zach Gallen, it's probably his last year in Arizona. He will probably be going elsewhere next offseason. Getting Corbin Burnes for the next 5 years is huge for the D-backs. An ace in the building. Love it by Mike Hazen, this D-backs front office. So once again, they absolutely crushed it. And I even like the moves on the margins, the minor league signings, Trey Mancini, Garrett Hampson, Greg Kessinger. I know there's some other guys I'm missing. Like, I feel like all the moves the D-backs have made have been really smart. They continue to spend a lot of money, the most money they've ever spent, and they continue to show their commitment to winning, which is all that we want as baseball fans. I'm sorry if you're not like a Dodgers fan or a fan of like a big market team or a D-backs fan, it's probably pretty depressing for you this offseason. Like if you're a Baltimore Orioles fan coming off the season you just had and you let Corbin Burnes go to Arizona, it's like, why wouldn't we resign him? I'm sorry if you're not a fan of the D-backs, because I'm sure it's a very sad time for you right now. And to make matters worse, my next topic that I want to discuss, should the D-backs go after Vlad Guerrero Jr.? We'll discuss that in segment number 3. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. My favorite Wonderful Pistachios I actually have right here. Sorry to the audio listeners only. You're going to have to go to YouTube for this one, because right next to me, I got 3 of my favorite flavors here. And this is what is great about Wonderful Pistachios. Unsalted right here, no shell. Chili roasted, no shell. And then this one is roasted and salted with the shell. The great thing about Wonderful Pistachios is the variety. You could get salted, unsalted, with shell, no shell. Get a little kick to it if you wanted to. No matter what flavor you want, they have a variety and a profile that fits just for you. So please go get yourself some Wonderful Pistachios, get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and now we got a fun topic to discuss. Should the Dbacks target Vlad Guerrero Jr.? Just realized I spelled Dbacks wrong on my rundown. The question or the answer to this question is obviously yes, right? If you're in position to target and acquire Vlad Guerrero Jr., you have to do it. But the topic I more want to discuss is it realistic, and do the Dbacks actually have a chance to get him? Because there's been not like reportings, but people are just doing like early contender rankings of like who the most likely suitors are that could get Vlad Guerrero Jr., like who could be best positioned, who could make the best offer, and what are teams that like Vladdy would actually like maybe even consider. And our team, the D-backs, has been like floated around. Are they the top contender? Maybe, maybe not. Depends who you ask. Of course, people want to put the Dodgers and the Mets and all the big market teams, but the D-backs quietly are on a few people's radars as a team to watch out for in the sweepstakes that are going to commence, if not next offseason, then this trade deadline, because we are officially on the clock for Vlad Guerrero Jr. He has said openly he is not going to discuss an extension with the Blue Jays. He is going to wait until the offseason, until free agency. He said the Blue Jays had their moment and they didn't get him a contract that he thought warranted his ability. He's going to test out free agency. And so Blue Jays, depending on how this season goes, right? If you get to the deadline, you're just a mediocre below 500 team, they probably should trade Vlad Guerrero Jr. because it feels more likely than not, if they don't pony up $400 million, he's going to leave this offseason. So if he becomes available at this deadline, which would make him as a rental potentially a little bit more cheaper, maybe the D-backs should just go out. Maybe the D-backs should just go out there and acquire him at the deadline. If not, just wait until the offseason, because Vlad Guerrero Jr. is someone that is going to command a lot of money, and that's going to be the question for the D-backs. How much money are they willing to pony up for Vlad Guerrero Jr.? Because you look at some of the contracts that are being signed right now, and Vladdy is someone that is definitely going to get paid if he has a season anywhere close to what he just had, because a 940 OPS, a 323 average, 30 home runs, 100 ribbies, like the numbers were phenomenal. Now, the prior 2 seasons, he was like good, but not great. So if you get 2021 Vladdy or 2024 Vladdy, that is a true MVP contender. It just doesn't seem like you get that guy year after year. And so if he has another season like he just had, he's going to get so much money next offseason, going to be like 26, 27 years old. Like, he's going to command probably an 8-year deal that's going to pay him $35 to $45 million a year. And so if you're the D-backs, if you are serious about maybe going after him next offseason, you first have to ask yourself, are you okay paying up that money? Because with Corbin Burnes already getting over $200 million, you might have to start doing some Dodger level deferrals if you are interested in a Vlad Guerrero Jr. Now, the good thing is there are some D-backs players that are going to be coming off the books for you next year that should give you some extra leeway in terms of spending power, because our current first baseman, in terms of a hole opening up on the roster, Josh Naylor, is a pending free agent at the end of this season. I think if Naylor has a great year, he is a candidate to come back, considering he's still super young. Might just depend on his defense with the D-backs. You know, we know the D-backs really care about defense. So if he's mediocre in that area, maybe not, we bring him back next offseason. But regardless, he's going to be a free agent. He comes off the books. He's the first baseman. That's a spot open up. That's money off the books. That's easy to put Vlad Guerrero Jr. now in the conversation in that hypothetical argument. And it's not just Naylor coming off the books. Like we said, Zach Gallen, pending free agent for the D-backs, fan favorite, but he's going to command probably like $25 million a year as a free agent pitcher. D-backs don't want to pay that. Merrill Kelly's a pending free agent. I would hope we could afford Merrill Kelly. He's not going to be too expensive, but he could be off the books. Eugenio Suarez, like we just re-signed Perdomo. Jordan Lawler might get called up mid-season to start getting some playing time, and then by next season could be a full-time player. So with Eugenio off the books, Lawler, his arbitration, he's in arbitration. He's going to cost nothing, and so that's more money D-backs are saving. And then potentially a guy like Lourdes Gurriel, he's on like a player option. I doubt he turns it down, but if he wanted to, he could go out there and test free agency as well. And so when I talk about the money potentially D-backs could have available, Gallen, Kelly, Eugenio, Gurriel, like the D-backs could have a lot of money to spend next offseason all of a sudden if they want to go out there and get a Vlad Guerrero Jr. But like I was saying before, if the Blue Jays really struggle in the first half and get to the deadline, they're mediocre. The D-backs should put out some feelers with the representation of the Blue Jays and not even the Blue Jays, with Guerrero's representation. Obviously, that's quote-unquote tampering, but that's what all the teams do. And if the D-backs find out Guerrero would be open to an extension with the D-backs, would be willing to re-sign if the number is right, I would just trade for him at the deadline. I don't think you have to give up the cream of the crop. You might not have to give up Jordan Lawler. Yes, you might still have to give up like Christian Mena, maybe another top prospect, but you might not have to give up the creme de la creme when it comes to acquiring Vlad Guerrero Jr. as a potential half-season rental. And so if you're able to get a little word early that Guerrero would resign with the D-backs for the right number, I would just trade for him at the deadline, have him in the building, because if you have him in the building, then you have a great run through the postseason. It's easier to keep someone once they've been in the building, felt the clubhouse vibes, because I believe once you come to Arizona, it's going to be hard to leave. And just the other reason why the D-backs have to at least throw their name in the hat when it comes to Vladdy, not just because he's, of course, a monster talent, but to just hopefully block the other teams of the Dodgers, the Mets, whatever NL team. The San Francisco Giants are going to be all over Vlad Guerrero Jr. as well. Like the D-backs might need to just throw their name in the ring just so they could block the other National League teams from getting Vlad Guerrero Jr. But if you're actually talking about the case that the D-backs can make, I mean, they're young, they're good, they're talented. It's like you can be on you could be on the young, talented version of the Blue Jays who are actually good, Vladdy. Come play with Corbin Carroll. Come be with Ketel Marte. That trio is one of the best in Major League Baseball. With the rotation that boasts Corbin Burns and the next great closer in Justin Martinez, you can help build something in Arizona. Not even help build something. It's already being built. You could continue the project that we're building out here, Vlad Guerrero Jr. Help us finish our home. I'm praying. I'm hoping. I'm not putting the percentages very high. CBS Sports actually had us number 3 in their power ranking to sign Vlad Guerrero Jr. next offseason. I don't think I would have the D-backs that high, but I do think the D-backs should and will be serious suitors for Vlad Guerrero Jr. next offseason. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Dose.